Hi, I'm Imogen Lamport from Inside Out Style and 16 Style Types.
And I'm Jill Chivers from Shop Your Wardrobe and 16 Style Types. And today in this video, we wanted to talk to you about the process for getting to understanding what your style type actually is. And sometimes this is called getting to best fit type. That's the terminology that's used. You might have seen that online if you've done any searching, or even if you're new to this, it'll be a term you become familiar with. This whole idea that out of the 16 possible style types, one of them is a better fit for you than all the others. And, you know, if you've done, say, the MBTI in the past, maybe part of your job, you might have a 4-letter type that you believe is your best fit type. And the process of going through our program, Your Type of Style, could confirm that, or it could actually bring up some questions for you about whether that's right for you or not. Because, you know, it's such an interesting thing because we don't live in a vacuum. We become who we are as a process of so many different influences, our family of origin, our background, our education, cultural influences, political influences, so many different things, geography, where we live, all of those things. And, you know, we don't become women of a certain age without accumulating a lot of experiences and skills along the way. So getting to best fit type, whether you've heard of the MBTI or psychological type before, or it's brand new to you, it's a journey. And what we want to talk to you about is some of the things that you can do wherever you are on your knowledge and education continuum to help you feel comfortable with the style type that you choose as your best fit type.
And I think it's really important to always remember that we're talking about best fit. We're not talking about perfect fit necessarily. And that you're a unique human being, and, you know, descriptions have been written by fallible human beings, and many descriptions written by men and don't always fit women as well as they could. Also, most descriptions are written by somebody who is not that type as well. So it's it's the outsider looking in a way as well. And I think it's always important to remember those things. So, but it's really the close enough one, the one that feels like it fits the best out of all the types. And usually we can know very easily what we're not. You know, there's some stuff it's like, I am just not that. And this is where one of the things I think, you know, you can easily look at is look at our 4 super styles. The SF, our style esthetician, our ST, our style pragmatist. Just those 2 words is going to give you a little insight of, am I more an esthetician or a pragmatist? It's going to give you a little bit of, you know, an idea. Then we've got our NT, who is our style strategist, and our NF, who is our style dreamer. And some of those, maybe 1 or 2 of those is going to appeal to you much more than the others. And that's going to cut out, you know, 8 types to start with very simply, just looking at those. But we've also got some other questions. And today we wanted to bring up just 2 little things that you could start to think about that might help lead you down the path to finding your best fit type.
Yeah, and one of the things that we do in the type coaching and facilitation world is we do refer back to when you were a child or when you were an early adult, somewhere in that time period between, say, 12 and 22. Now, that varies a lot because it depends on so many things about your upbringing and your background, and who you were allowed to be, how many restrictions were placed on you, how free you were allowed to be, all of those kinds of things, because we've all had different childhood experiences. But the whole idea, that the central principle at play here is that your innate self is like a cork. And over time, if that cork is held underwater, you can start to think that it's truly submerged. But all you have to do is take your hand off and it will pop to the surface. And that's sort of the whole idea that we are who we are. We were born with an innate personality, just like we were born with certain physical characteristics, which is not to say we're a predetermined being, where our path is, you know, set for us. We're not predictable, but we are pattern making. This is part of what makes us human, is this pattern making. So when we look back at certain periods in our life, particularly when we were younger, we can be led to an understanding of, well, what really was I encouraged to learn? What's my learned behavior pathway here? And some questions around that. And then when I can look back at instances where my innate preferences really were allowed to come to the fore. And it's a bit sort of yin and yang in that regard, because we've all got examples of both. And depending on that period of time in your life, you might have more of one or more of the other. So one of the questions that you can ask is, what are the qualities in yourself that have been there way back since you were a child? When you think back to any instance in your life, childhood through to adolescence, through to early adulthood, you can think of maybe a favorite story or something that a sibling or a family member says, hey, you were always blah. Or, this is something that's always been a part of who you were. This can be a really helpful way of saying, well, who am I innately? If this is something that I've heard about myself from way back when stories about me were being accumulated and now told or told over again, what are these things that are true about me? That can be a very insightful question to ask perhaps of family members, to sit with. If you have friends that go way back to early in your life, that can be helpful to ask them, what was I like in high school? That can be a really interesting question to ask. You have to be prepared for the answer, but it can be really illuminating. You get a sense of, what did other people see in me? Now, getting to best fit type is not an exercise. It's not a democratic exercise where you cobble together what everybody else thinks. It really is an internal job. That kind of feedback can be really, really useful and illuminating.
And it can be worthwhile thinking back to things like, do you remember people making comments to you about something about who you are as a person? I mean, I remember just, something that popped in my mind was that I remember my cousin, and we were very close, same age. We were very close, hung out together a lot as kids. And somewhere in the teenage years, she said to me, I wish I was like you. You're so organized. You've got a place for everything and everything in its place, sort of thing. And it's funny because, now knowing I am a J type and she is a P type. And that sort of, outer world organization is something that's quite common of J types. So that she was saying something that, like that now I go, oh, yeah, well, that makes complete sense when we think about it now.
Yeah. One of my early experiences was being told I was a chatterbox. And I remember being told this when I was 7, and it was not a compliment. It was really a negative. And it came out of, there was a fun bike ride, a fun ride. I don't know, a fun run, but people were on bikes. And it was, I don't know, a 60K thing. And I was in a car with one of my mum's friends. This was a church event. And we got to the end, and Mrs. Sylvia, her name was Sylvia, pronounced to my mother that I didn't shut up the entire way. And I look back at that, and that I knew I was being chastised. I knew that was not a positive thing. And I think of the way you talk about your daughter who has extroversion, and how, when we first started doing this and she was 14 and she knows she's an extrovert. And I remember saying to you, I wish I knew I was an extrovert when I was 14. Well, I wish I knew a hell of a lot earlier than that. It really would have saved me an awful lot of grief to have known that being a natural extrovert is not wrong. That is not to say it's carte blanche to just take up all the airspace in the room and talk when you should be quiet, any of those kinds of things. But just to know it's not bad to be an extrovert, because I really thought it was bad to be a chatterbox.
So I could think about my daughter, and like she always from a very young age was like, ring someone up, get someone over to play, or like make me a play date with someone. Like there was, so, I can think back, and it's not that it was a bad thing, or, but it was interesting that versus my son never had the same requests, that she was like always requesting, we've got to be out, we want to be doing things, we want to be seeing people.
That's right. The external world needs to be full of stimulating either activities or people or both, because that's one of the definitions of extroversion, is that your energy is oriented towards the external world, and it's an uplift in energy when you spend time in that space. Now, of course, we all know that even if we have a preference for extroversion, we need introversion. Same is true. It's never, balance is never 50. This is another misconception when we talk about balance. This is where the term ambivert came from. When you understand true type, you realize you just don't need the term ambivert. It's just truly not necessary to feel authentic and whole as a person. I understand what the term
So
though.
tell me, Jill, what's a positive or a favourite story somebody said about you as a child that encapsulates you?
Well, I don't know whether it's so much as a child, but I remember early in university when we started doing group assignments, which I don't remember doing in first year. It was all very foundational. I did a business degree. Who knows how on earth I even got into university? It's still a miracle to me. Anyway, in second year, we started specialising. I did a marketing degree and we started doing group assignments. And I was always a coordinator. Now, what's interesting here is, and this is where the work of Linda Behrens and interaction styles is really crucial. I never wanted to be the boss, as in charge. That's one of Linda's terms. I always wanted to be in the mix, though, and her other term she has 4 terms, 2 for the extroverted types, 2 for the introverted types. The other term for the extroverted group is get things going. And so I always wanted to be a central coordinating point. I always wanted to have a voice. I was often really good at giving out tasks that, strangely enough, were appropriate, without even knowing any of this stuff, like knowing who might be good at certain things, which is not to say I didn't make many, many mistakes. I'm sure that I did. But I became known. I went to a relatively small university. Marketing was one of the smallest streams. Accounting was the big one. So I became really well known as a good person to be on a project because shit got done.
That's interesting. And then, because you've already talked about the negative, being told you're a chatterbox in a very negative way. So it is thinking about like those positive things. It's good to think about what are the positive things, like versus what are the negative things. Like, I mean, I remember as a teenager, getting split up into a group to do some drama thing. And one of the people in the group just went, just do what Imogen says, she's bossy. And I'm not an in charge type, but I am a chart the course, which is the introverted version of like, let's actually get ourselves on track.
Yeah. Let's make a plan. Yeah.
And also as a thinking type, I'm an effectiveness thinking type. I don't want to be wasting a whole lot of time. And, maybe I come across as bossy because I'm not worrying about group harmony. That's something that you might have, would not have been told you were bossy in the same way, I'm sure.
Yeah. And even that's a really, really good point, just taking a brief sidebar around this, because there can be myths and stereotypes like, well, if you're not concerned with group harmony, then that's somehow wrong or bad, or there's a negative judgment based on that. Having worked now on so many projects, I can't even count them. I've spent years working for a big global accounting firm, multi-phase, multi-year, multi-million-dollar projects. Sometimes a focus on harmony leads you off track. It gets you down the wrong pathway. You waste so much time. This is why it's not a one size fits all. This is always correct. That's never correct. These are some of the things too that we can let go of, or we just are given a different flashlight to see something that we've always thought was one way. And this is another thing that can be helpful in best fit type. We had a woman doing our program who always thought she was feeling preference, and she did an exercise like this, asking family and friends, and she came to a clearer, more positive understanding of thinking, which she had clearly accumulated a number of negative things, particularly a thinking woman. And she was able to say, you know what, I'm a thinking preference woman, and this is great. This feels really, really good to claim this about myself, because I had all this stuff about it, sort of negative judgment stuff about it. So that wasn't so much this exercise of going back to childhood. This was about accumulating feedback and actually listening to it. It can be confronting. It can, one of the other exercises we say is, if you're an animal, what would you be? That also can be quite confronting to listen to that, but also incredibly illuminating. You got to pick the people you ask for feedback very carefully. They have to have your best interests at heart and all those kinds of things. But it can really make you rethink things that either you've never thought about, or you thought about in a certain way and you've just never come back to it.
Yeah, because there's so many things we can think about when we're coming to our best fit type. like really is. But if we can think about, sometimes usually those messages that we hear stick, like, those memories, they're often the sticky messages. And it could be because they've said something that we didn't relate to ourselves, like the I'm bossy. I didn't realize I was bossy. But it was probably being a thinking woman who was solutions focused and time focused, being aware that we had limited time and all those sorts of things, that I was just playing to my strengths.
Yeah. Without being aware that they were a strength and that they were, being utilized, that other people were experiencing them. We sometimes use the term bump up against. Other people are experiencing us in a particular way. And this is part of the journey. And what we do in your type of style is, even if you're absolutely 100% certain on a 4-letter type, it's still interesting to receive feedback. And of course, we're doing it through the lens of style, but it flows over as many elements of your life as you want it to. And, which brings us to the idea of thinking about, messages that you picked up along the way about what you were. The other question that you can ask to get closer to best fit type is kind of, what was I forced into being? What were those messages that I was told, that ladies don't, give their opinions so forcefully, or, couldn't you be more like so-and-so? I grew up in a particular religion, and one of the messages that I was given is I should always be like Julia. And Julia was very ladylike. Julia was not a chatterbox. Julia was some sort of expert cook by the time she was 12, and, always in the service of other people. And actually, Julia was a great person. But I kind of, grew a bit sick of the comparisons to being like Julia, which I was nothing like. And now I realize that she was an introvert. She was probably an ISFJ, so not that different to me. But, I just wasn't Julia, and I couldn't be Julia. But, I got a lot of messages about how that would be preferable.
Yes. So I think, listening to what are those negative things people said and how you maybe didn't fit into whatever mold they wanted for you, and what you do hear, like what were some of the positive things that you may have heard that you didn't really realize but may relate to your type, and understanding which are those kind of dominant functions, the ones that make it, that they're innate, they're easy, they don't sap your energy when you're in them, you get flow really easily, they are a joy to be there. And this is the thing, we've got to remember, we have lifetimes of experience, and it's very easy to start thinking, well, I can do something. We can all do lots of things because we've learned how to do it. Like, I can drive a car. I wasn't a baby born knowing how to drive a car. Like,
You're one of those ones that had to learn it. Right.
I had to learn how to do it. And so, that is a learned skill. And I now can do it without thinking.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is learned skills can become so habituated we don't think about them. But it was very a learned skill. And I think that is the difference from that to the innate. Where do I just go without even thinking about it? Something that's, and you'll hear about people talking about their children. It's like, my son just organized all his trucks in a row or something. And I'm like, well, there's probably a J type. There'll
be child who asks for a diary probably might have some J going on there.
Yeah. Unless it could be an FP who wants to put all their thoughts in the world into that diary, because it depend if the diary is about appointments or the diary is about, I want to journal my life down.
Yeah.
Different uses of diaries. So I think this is where, like, these are just two of the questions you could ask yourself. We have lots more in the program, in our Your Type of Style program. But these are just two things that if you're thinking about your type and even wondering, is the type that I have been given, because often people do this in a work environment, they answer the questions in the what can I do way rather than what is innate to me way. And this is where often mistyping happens. Yeah. And also in the comparison way. And I see this a lot where people think, well, I'm not as, like, I might say I'm not as planned as Jill, so I must be a P. I like flexibility. I must be a P. I'm just not an EJ, I'm an IJ. It's a different flavor of that. So often that comparison is not necessarily great. It's like the difference between prepared and planned. That the prepared people think they're planning, but they're not planning in the way someone who's a planner plans.
And look, there's a lot of great information on psychological type. It is actually experiencing a real burgeoning in popularity. You know, the millennials and the generation that's coming up before them, whatever, after them, whatever they're called.
Zeds.
Are they the Zeds?
Yeah.
Well, there's such an interest in 20 and 30-year-olds in psychological type. It's not going anywhere, that's for sure. So there is some great information, and there is also some poor quality information out there. To me, one of the most important things is that you get proper information, but then you personalize it. And that's what we offer in your type of style, is just so many invitations to experience your type, both just from a cognitive understanding, because for some people that's really important, but also to experience it. So there's just the your type of style program. It's 12 modules, and there are so many play shops, I can't even count them. Just different invitations to experience your style through the lens of your type. We have over 100 videos in the entire program as well as a monthly live Q&A. So if you have questions, or you think you're going to have questions, there's an opportunity every single month based on that month's programs to put your questions forward, and we will talk about them. And that's really helpful, not only to the person asking the question, but to others who are listening to it as well. So there's all these opportunities for you to really go as deep as you like in understanding your style type, get clarity in your best fit type, and your style type.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that a style type doesn't mean you have to wear certain clothes.
Yeah.
It just tells you your approach to style. You get to choose what you wear. We're not trying to box you in that way in the slightest, because I know sometimes people think, oh, they're just going to put me in a box. But really, it's not about that in the slightest. And there is no way you could walk down the street and think that person's this type because of what they're wearing, because there's so much in style that informs what we wear. But we'd love to have you in the program. Do head on over and have a look at the Your Type of Style program.